Hello everyone, today is going to be a tutorial video, more specifically a Unity-based tutorial, and I'm going to cover step-by-step, hand-holding included, steps that you need to do to make sure that you don't lose your work, that you don't end up stressed out, and that you know how to prepare and what to expect when you are converting your older project that's using Unity built-in standard shaders or custom written shaders to the new standard, which is using a rendering pipeline such as HD, LOD, or universal rendering pipelines. While I was searching for a solution, I was converting my own project. I've noticed that a lot of people are having different kinds of issues when converting. So I wanted to collate all of the info that I've experienced during my conversion of the project and to try and make a step-by-step guide that will help you safely convert your project, and it will help you understand how much time it will take, how to plan, how to prepare, and all of these kinds of things. Because depending on your project, it might not be a small undertaking, so it should not be underestimated. All right, so let's get going. Who is this guide for? Well, here's the thing. If you've started your project before the introduction of the rendering pipelines and you never converted, then this is definitely for you. If you created a new project and you used one of these non-rendering pipeline project as a template, then your project needs to be converted because you're using Unity's built-in standard shaders. That's basically the first thing that you have to check out. If you're working on a project that needs to support multi-platforms, mobile, PC, consoles, Nintendo Switch, or whatever, then you most definitely want to use the universal rendering pipeline. If you're using Unity to create, let's say, an animated movie or a commercial or a super high definition type of a project that's probably going to run on PC or a PS Pro, then you would use the HDRP. For my needs, since I'm creating a project that's going to be multi-platform supported, then of course I'm going to be showing the example of universal rendering pipeline conversion. This is a really bare bones type of a scene. It doesn't have much, but it has the things that I want to show. First of all, we have standard shader, which is this guy here, so normal standard shader, and similar type of a standard shader is used on the ball itself. The stand itself is using an old mobile diffuse shader. And this guy here is a custom shader that was written a long time ago, and it just uses a main texture and a mask texture. Overall, the scene is using a normal main camera, but it's using a post-processing layer, which means post-processing V2. And as a child, it has an object called post-processing, which is my actual post-processing volume. This one is using one of the post-processing profiles, so all standard stuff. I've included the link down below. There's a full list that shows exactly when you're converting from standard built-in shaders to universal render pipeline shaders. There's a whole list that actually says which shaders will be converted. This means that shader types that are not listed there, they will be pink and your data will be lost. So you have to prepare yourself for some work. Good news, we have a shader graph, which is absolutely fantastic. So that will make recreation of some of the shaders a breeze, but only if you prepare yourself in a good way so that you don't have a lot of back and forth. So let's start with the steps, and we're going to go step by step how to safely convert your standard built-in project to a universal render pipeline type of Unity project. All right, so the very first step is to actually completely copy your entire project directory into a new one. So you need or make a backup. So if you want to work in the newly copied project, or you want to just use the copied project as a backup, completely doesn't matter, but you need to have both projects there for you to reference things, to check things out, to see what's what, to double check things and compare until you're sure that your conversion is complete. This is the most important step, so that's step number 1. The next thing that you need to do before you convert anything is that if you're using post-processing stack, V1 or V2, it doesn't matter. If you've downloaded it from Unity Asset Store, or if you've used the package manager to get it from there, then you will need to uninstall it. But before you uninstall, you need to take screenshots of your post-processing profiles. They are not compatible. The modules have changed, and they've been organized in a much better way and much more economical. So, for example, if you just wanted to use gamma, gain, and all that kind of stuff, you no longer need the whole color correction panel. You just have the gain or gamma module there, which is great. But the names of classes have completely changed, and the namespace has also changed. So referencing in scripts will not work, and your post-processing profiles will not work. And the bad thing is that once you upgrade, they're gone. You won't be able to see your settings at all to copy them. So you have to take a screenshot of your settings, or whatever way works for you. For me personally, screenshots work best because I just make it, name it what the profile is, and that's it. A very important step, because in the next step, we're going to lose these. So now that you've made your project backup and you've taken screenshots or written down the parameters of your post-processing profiles, now it's safe to remove your post-processing package. And that's really important. You have to remove the post-processing first prior to upgrading anything. If you've installed your post-processing package from the asset store, then you have to locate it in your project somewhere around here where it is. And then you will be able to just delete it. However, hopefully you've used the package manager here, and that makes things a lot easier because you can just find it in the list here and then click on remove. So when I click on remove, he says, do you want to remove the package? Yep. And he processes. And now, depending on your project, you might end up with some errors. And it's really important that at this stage you address these errors, because your project needs to be able to compile properly before you proceed to the next step. And the errors that I'm getting are in reference to a script that is using the post-processing here. And the script is super simple. Let's just drag it over here so that you guys can see. It's really, really simple. It was just made to control bloom intensity and bloom diffusion. And I just referenced the bloom, and yeah, I was able to, in this little function here, I was able to just change the slider and change the intensity from the inspector from that parameter here. Just an interactive type of thing. However, you'll notice that, of course, since we've removed post-processing, the namespace post-processing, rendering post-processing is gone. It no longer exists. So we have to make sure that your project, or that the project compiles before proceeding further. Now, don't delete this, because you'll probably need some of it as a referencing point at a later date when we upgrade. But for now, let's just get rid of the stuff that is causing us problems, so that you can be sure that you compile. So once this is done, let's get this out of the way. And let's see here, we should be able to compile normally. Yep, error-free. Now we've made the backup of the project, took screenshots of our post-processing profiles, removed the post-processing, and updated our scripts so that we compile. This is the stage where you want to be at when you import the universal rendering pipeline package. So now we are safe to actually proceed with that. You go to packages, and then depending on what package you want, HDRP if you want HDRP, and universal if you want the universal RP. I'm going to go for universal RP from the packages manager, and I'm just going to click on install. It's going to take a little while to install. It's imported and recompiled. We don't have any errors, and that's a really good thing. If you have errors, then you need to fix them immediately before proceeding to the next step. Otherwise, you won't be able to, because scripts associated with the rendering pipeline profile that you imported will not compile, and you need them to compile in order to proceed further. So once your project has been upgraded with the rendering pipeline, rendering profile or whatever, there are two main things that you need to do. First one is we need to create a rendering profile and associate it with the project. And the second one is we will need to upgrade our shaders, and you'll see why. So let's now go into the root of the assets. If I right click, and if your project is able to compile, in the Create section, you will be able to see the new submenu, which is called Rendering. And in the rendering, depending on which pipeline you've installed, you'll have Universal Rendering Pipeline or HDRP. And we need to create a pipeline asset. So this one. So I'm going to create it, and we're going to name it my conversion pipeline. All right, and that actually creates two assets. So in this my conversion pipeline asset, or the pipeline asset, you will be able to now set project-related rendering settings, such as, do we want to use HDR? Do we want to use anti-aliasing? Do we want to use render scale, shadows, global lighting, and all sorts of useful things. Really, really nice that it's centralized and it works great. However, on its own, it's still not doing anything. We need to assign it to the project. And this is done by going into the project settings and then into the graphics section. And the very first thing that you will see is scriptable render pipeline settings. And currently none are assigned. So we're just going to click here, assign our render pipeline. Things change. For that, you will need a complete guide on how to use a rendering pipeline. This is not it. This is just a conversion. But more importantly, now that we've switched it and we go back, everything's pink. So our objects are not lost, but all of our shader data is gone. Now, fret not. The list of shaders that you have down below and that I talked about a little bit earlier, those will be able to be converted to the rendering pipeline shaders in the following step. This you can do easily by going into Edit, then down to Rendering Pipeline. Then you choose your rendering pipeline. In my case, it's Universal Rendering Pipeline. And then you have the option of upgrade the entire project materials to Universal RP materials, or upgrade selected materials to Universal RP materials. I'm going to click on the whole project because this tutorial is about upgrading the entire project. So we're going to click here, and then he says this will overwrite your materials in your project, and there's no way of going back. So even if you haven't made a backup up until this point, you really should have had that done earlier, because once this is done, all of your materials will be overwritten. Just a word of warning. So I'm going to proceed, and bam, bam, bam. There's a couple of things here that don't work. And right off the bat, we see that some of the materials have been successfully changed. One of them has not been. This is the custom one, and the previous old one is having some issues. It didn't convert properly because it was not a standard built-in shader. So Unity will still try to convert it to something and to just make like a best closest fit that it can. And the only problem here is that it didn't have the color information from before, but everything else is properly converted so that it actually can be usable. However, if you're like me and you have a bunch of custom shaders in your project, then you won't be so lucky, because those custom shaders that make your game look special, they're all going to be pink and lost. And that's going to be a little bit deflating. So for these missing materials, I'm not going to make a tutorial right now in this video on how to convert these guys, but now that you've actually switched to Universal or HDRP, you have full access to the awesome shader graph, and hopefully recreating these shaders is going to be a breeze. However, this is why you need those 2 copies of the project, so that you can reference and see what the original shader was doing and that you can recreate it in Shader Graph. And then you go one by one. So my advice would be to actually go through all of the materials in your project and mark down which shader types are wrong and which need to be rewritten using Shader Graph. Once you have that done, then you go into your old project and you go each one by one. You write down what they need to do, or you convert them immediately, like manually convert them, but you will need to do it one by one, or assign an adequate existing shader from the Shader Graph examples that are plenty. Depending on your project, that can be a huge step that takes a long time, a lot of work hours and all of these kinds of things. So you need to be prepared for this step. It's a very, very important one. No shortcuts here, unfortunately. All right, so now that we've dealt with our project and with our shaders and most of the stuff is there, we need to address one last thing, which is the post-processing. And it functions very differently, and you cannot reuse any of the stuff that you've had before. So let me just show here my old post-processing profile, gone. And it won't show any of the settings from before. Thankfully, I've got my screenshot for my profile, so a little bit of manual labor again is going to be involved, but at least nothing is lost. So how do we actually proceed with adding the post-processing in a universal rendering pipeline, or HDRP scene? Well, we're going to have to delete these guys. That would be the best way to do it, because cameras work differently once you're using the universal rendering pipeline. So I'm going to create a new camera. And we're going to explore a couple of things here, but one very important note. If you had scripts that were using camera.main to reference and find your camera, that will no longer work. So you will need to update your scripts, and you should anyway, because camera.main is not an optimal way of doing things. But yeah, it kind of forces you to make sure that you're using things properly, and it may make sure that you're referencing the correct camera once this has been done. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow my old type of workflow. So I'm going to copy the transform of the old camera, paste the transform values so that it's positioned in the same place. I'm going to make it a physical camera and make sure that we are both looking at the same thing. So I'm just going to change the background. So it's going to use a solid color, which was black. And now when I switch between the old and the new, I have the same camera setup, which is great. So that means that I'm safe to say bye-bye to my old camera. Great. Let's now save this. Okay, so saving has changed the color. Interesting. That's not fun. Hopefully, once I save it again, it won't change. All right, now it worked. So now I have my camera, and I have a post-processing that doesn't have anything on it. The camera itself no longer needs the whole layer type of thing to add. Instead, you have a checkbox in the camera itself that says post-processing on or off. And this is basically the replacement for the layer component from before. Now we need to add our post-processing volume to my post-processing object. And if I start going post-processing, I only have my script, but you no longer have the post-processing class at all. So now it's called just volume. And if I add the volume, you'll see that we have it's slightly different looking, but exactly the same type of parameters like before. So I'm going to make it global, weight 0, priority 0, and I'm going to make sure that I'm using a profile. I don't have a profile. So now I need to create a new post-processing profile, but it took me a while to actually figure out where to find it and how to find it, because it's a little confusing. It's called differently. So if I go here and I check the profile, it's we're used to calling them post-processing profiles, but you can find the hint here for the type of class it's looking for, and that is volume profiles. So they're no longer called post-processing profiles, they're called volume profiles. And if I go right click here, go into create, if I try to find it in rendering, universal rendering pipeline, and then I can find post-process data, that's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is, remember, volume profile class, and you will be able to find it right here underneath the scene. So now it's called volume profile. Your post-processing profile is called volume profile. Let's click on it. We have the new PPP, and we have the same type of stuff as before. So I'm just going to add an override, and I'm going to go into post-processing, and you can see the modules here have changed, and they've been arranged in a much better way. I think it's much more efficient and gives you much better control than before. So I'm just going to add a bloom. And a tip for anyone who doesn't know it, and you don't have to click on all of these guys. If you want to add overrides to most of them, you can just click on the little all word, and it just clicks them all. And let's see, we're going to use high quality filtering. Clamping is fine, everything else is fine. And let's just adjust this using my screenshot. So I have my screenshot, and it says intensity 1, threshold 0.4, and soft knee 0.6. So let's do that. We no longer have the control of soft knee and the diffusion separately. I don't know exactly if that's the case, but it looks like that they have been merged together into one parameter that is now called scatter. So for me, it worked really well to actually convert the scatter values from diffuse values that I had before to scatter values that I have now. All right, now that I have my profile recreated, I can assign it to my post-processing. So if I go to post-processing and assign the new profile, it should click on automatically if your rendering post-processing is turned on. If it doesn't click on automatically, it's one of two things. The first thing you want to check is to make sure that the post-processing on the camera itself is turned on. So you got to make sure that that's that. When you're creating your scene from the get-go and your entire project is made in this manner that it's using the universal or some kind of a pipeline, it won't be a problem at all. You won't experience this problem. However, when you're upgrading from a previous project, it's very, very likely that you've used layers for your post-processing and that you've used layer types for the volume masks or post-processing masks. So for example, in my case, what I had in my project was a layer called post-processing. And by default, this object here that holds the volume profile is set up to volume to the layer post-processing. And even though if I assign it here, it's assigned, and the camera is using the post-processing, I don't see the effect. The reason for that is that now in the camera, in the environment itself, underneath the background, we have that layer section again. So if I switch it now to post-processing, now I'm telling Unity or that camera, hey, look for post-processing profiles or volume profiles that are on layer post-processing and use them. And Unity knows how to do that. So just be sure that if it's not working for you, it can be one of those two things. Either it's not turned on in the camera, or you are using a layer on your volume profile and your camera is not finding it because you didn't set it up in the environment section of the camera itself. All right, and final step is to convert our scripts and referencing to the old post-processing and convert it to use the new volume-oriented data. And I'm just going to show on this basic example here how this is done. So let's just make this a little bit bigger so that you guys can see properly, and maybe zoom in a little so that you can see the code. All right, so there's two main things that you need to know. Before we were able to use all the components that we needed by using just the post-processing namespace. Now we need to use two. So the first one we're going to be using is Unity Engine rendering, just the rendering itself. And this one gives us access to the volume itself. So what I'm going to do is change this guy who was called, my previous volume was called post-process volume. So now I'm just going to delete post-process, return it as volume, and it will work. And just to prove a point, if I disable the Unity rendering, the volume is no longer there. So that one's good. The next one that we need to use in order to gain access to all of the volume profile components is Unity Engine rendering. We're going to use, in my case, because I'm using the universal rendering pipe, it's going to be universal. So once that's done, I can just safely now get rid of the commenting out, and the same bloom works. Most of the stuff will work, some of it won't. Again, link down below is for the entire API for the universal and others, and then you can scroll through the list and see which class is which, but the workflow should be fairly similar. All right, so now let's get rid of this commenting out and initialize properly. So in order to get our volume, we are no longer looking for the post-process volume, but we're looking for just volume, and we're good. And the volume profile still exists. The only thing that's different is that the try get settings method is now just try get. So try get out which class do we want, bloom, and that is it. So that one is referencing out nicely, and we can just re-enable in the update here. Intensity still exists. Diffusion, as I mentioned, has been changed to scatter. So if I just add the scatter here, and yeah, I can just leave that. I would change that to bloom the scatter. Let's do that. So bloom scatter is here and there. So this is now nice and clean. So let's hide this, go back into Unity, and I've added the script here. So we have our bloom intensity and bloom scatter. Now when I hit play, it should be able to find automatically the component on the child. And in order to test that, because it's private, there we go. I'm just going into debug mode, but I can see that the post-processing volume has been found, and the bloom with the try get method has returned the bloom clone property as well, which is great. So everything's referencing normally, no errors, and I should be able to control my post-process using this. Now, the main difference here is that the scatter is no longer, now is clamped to range 0 to 1. So let's just change that for completeness sake. Let's just change the range here to 1. So 0 to 1, and bloom intensity is still fine. And recompile, and now it should work properly. So let's hit play, and now, yep, we have the scatter working as it should, and the intensity as well. And you can reference out to everything else using the links down below to find the documentation, and you will find all the answers there. Whew, a lot of stuff, isn't there? But following this type of workflow, it's going to help you not lose any work, and also hopefully it will prepare you to know how much time to allocate, what type of workload is in front of you, and what you actually need to do, so that you can weigh pros and cons and say, all right, I'm not converting at this time because I have too many custom shaders and that requires too much work, and benefits of a rendering pipeline are not that worthy, or sure, I can just do this, it works fine for me and I'm just going to do it. In my case, I decided to convert, because the shader graph just opens up possibilities that are unbelievable, and I can optimize my projects in super awesome ways using the shaders. So that's a really, really big benefit for me. Yes, it potentially can turn into a huge load of work, but if you weigh your priorities properly, I think that you'll be able to reach a good decision. And hopefully this video will help you not lose your data, not lose your nerves, and not get lost in the whole process of converting your project from standard built-in shaders to a render pipeline. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and more content of this type hopefully will be coming soon. See you later. Bye.